Welcome back to another episode of These Crazy Fools That Just Keep Eating Meat and Never Shut Up About It. It's just me and Justin again. Emily has decaffeinated and gone to bed. Joe Zumbo was out riding a giant red kangaroo. And Ray has disappeared into the ether. We don't know what's up with Ray. We don't want to start any sort of COVID-19 conspiracy theory, but it's entirely possible that he was called in to service some ventilators at the power department. So we're not really sure where Ray is, and I'm sure we'll hear from him soon. But if you have any negative comments about the video, make sure to send them to Raymond Nazon. He will take care of them promptly. And today, Justin and I are going to attack another article. We're going to give some people some what's what on the keto frontier. A lot of people on Carnivore were keto first. We kind of don't discriminate against anybody in the low-carb community. We kind of look at it all as one thing.
Represent!
That's right. So today's article, I shall share it with thou now, and it is called, let me know when it pops up there, Justin, on your end. Can you see it?
Yep, got it.
6 science-backed reasons you shouldn't use the keto diet. Okay, so this is the article. It's on a website called medium.com. I don't know what the hell medium.com is.
It's kind of like WordPress.
Oh.
Like anyone can post. People write up blogs and stuff like that. It's kind of all comers. They don't really censor. They're pretty open about, just letting, I think a free account and anyone can post up an article, I believe. There's like no credentialing or anything.
No credentialing. All right, so you ready to tear into this bad boy?
Oh yeah.
All right, so just start hammering away. Ooh, got a browser opening. I have notes that I can't read at the moment. So total calorie intake is still the most important thing. What say you, Justin?
I mean, it's really, okay, one of my biggest, we're going to get into more obviously, but honestly, for those that don't know, me and Tom also recently, like about a month ago, did a similar takedown to a different article.
Yeah,
And
I'll put the link in the show notes.
this article is actually, I'll give them credit, a little better written than that article. I actually have more stake with that article than this one. But man, the thing that bugs me about this article is that their entire arguments, the crux of it is on calories, But I mean, when did that book come out? Bad Calories, Good Calories.
I'm going to say 10 years ago. I don't remember exactly.
So, I mean, you know the book better than me. So why don't you give the audience a little rundown of the book and why their biggest number one complaint about calories is just silly?
Well, because, it really calls into question the idea that a calorie is a calorie, right? I mean, that's the issue. Is number one, I like to talk about how calories are actually measured and determined. So when you look at a package or you look up online and it says, oh, there's 1,000 calories in a ribeye steak. Okay, the way they calculate this is they take a sample of that food or whatever it is, they put it in this machine called a bomb calorimeter. Okay, I said bomb, B-O-M-B. Okay, and this is a stainless steel device. They put this little sample in there. They fill this thing with pure oxygen, and then they detonate it. And they measure how much energy comes out of that food when they detonate it.
That's the exact same way your body uses food, right? That's the exact same process.
Deep inside the human body, we have this stainless steel sphere that fills up with pure oxygen. Little pieces, 1 gram pieces of food drop in there and detonate, and that's where we get the measure of our calories. So right there, it's like, yeah, I have a hard time imagining everything is going to combust and release the same amount of energy. I realize you got to have some way of testing things, but obviously the process by which human beings derive energy from food is entirely different. The whole incredibly complicated process of generating ATP from food is very, very different than a bomb calorimeter. So that's one. And then two, it's not just, it's when you're eating food, it's not just a little packet of calories. It's full of all kinds of other stuff. What, hey, Justin, what else might there be in that little packet of food besides a calorie?
Well, I mean, right here, it's, I mean, they make the statement, it's in bold. It's the total number of calories you eat on a daily basis that will determine how your weight changes. What you eat, when you eat, and how you eat, it just don't make a difference in the way your total calorie intake does. Um, so, you know, in that packet, I mean, you have fillers, you have preservatives that some people react to. I mean, you ever pick up um, any food, I mean, they can range from 7, 8, 10 ingredients to, if you look up everyone's childhood favorite, childhood favorite cup of noodles, I mean, it's a paragraph of different ingredients. I mean, starches and additives and coloring. I mean, all kinds of stuff. I mean, the typical food on the shelves is more of a chemistry project than food.
Right. So I always like to make the point that number one, a calorie, you can't really just say a calorie is a calorie because your body is going to burn calories in a different order depending on what the calories are derived from. We really only have three main categories of food that we derive calories from. There's fat, which gives you 9 calories per gram. There's protein, which gives you 4 calories per gram. And then there's carbohydrates or sugars, which give you 4 calories per gram. But your body burns them in different orders, and one is less or more likely to be converted into fat and stored in the body, right? Now, a lot of this is dependent on whether you have a surplus of calories, or like if the cells have all the energy they want at that point, or where in the process you are, and so it is dependent on total calorie intake, how these things are handled, but they are not all handled the same. And not to confuse things, but to make a good point, alcohol, the kind we drink, ethyl alcohol or whiskey or vodka or beer or whatever, is a good example because you can derive calories from that, and it is not a carbohydrate or a sugar. It's not fat and it's not protein. And it doesn't turn into sugar in your body when you drink it like a lot of people think it does. But it's toxic. It's not a health food, and your body needs to get rid of it, and it can turn it into substances that are less toxic that can be burned as fuel, and your body will do that preferentially over the other sources of calories, which is protein, fat, and carbohydrate, because it wants to get rid of it. And so kind of the same thing is true of carbohydrates. When you have your blood sugar goes up above a normal range, your body preferentially wants to burn those sugar calories. But again, if your body can't burn them because it's already, as Bart would say, your cells are replete with energy, then it's going to turn it into fat and store it. So now some of it could get stored as glycogen or whatever in the muscles or in the liver and stuff like that. But when that storage capacity is full, it just goes into fat cells in the body, and it could very well get stored as fat around your organs, which is a bad thing. So your body handles things different. And on top of that, one of the important things to remember is that carbohydrates tend to be far less satisfying than, say, fat and protein. And I know people argue all day long whether fat or protein is more satisfying, but it just depends on who you ask, really, and which studies you're looking at. But the combination of fat and protein tends to be more satisfying. And when people are on a carnivore diet, they're essentially burning fat as fuel and protein, using protein to rebuild their body. Because protein is one of the last things that gets turned into body fat. So if your concern is to be leaner, that's a good strategy. If you're eating a bunch of carbohydrates, you eat an excess amount, then it's definitely going to be stored as body fat. And people tend to overeat on high carb diets because they tend not to be as satisfied when they're eating something like steak, right? You eat steak and eggs, bacon, and stuff like that tends to be very satisfying. People tend not to eat as much. And that's why it has such great utility. And that's why you can't just say a calorie is a calorie, because you can't look at a list and go, I can eat the same number of calories of this and the same number of calories of this and have the same result, because it just doesn't work. Now, when you're in good shape and you're on a very controlled diet and stuff like that, then people can actually get on a scale and say, oh, I need to eat more, I need to eat less, and stuff like that, and they regulate. But to know exactly how many calories you're burning, and of course, one of the advantages of a high-fat diet like keto is when people first go on it, their bodies aren't used to burning that much fat, so your body tends to waste a lot of the fat. Now, that may change over time as the body adapts and gets more efficient at burning the fat, but in the beginning, that's a nice little piece of leverage that helps people lose some weight. So you got anything to add to that?
No, I think that covers point one.
All right, we hammered point one. Let's go on to point two. Let me pull it up here. Share the old share screen. Let me know when you see it. So
You're
point number
live.
2, you don't have to go low carb to lose weight. And I would agree with that. That statement I don't really have a problem with. There are other ways to lose weight. I would say, however, that one of the things about carnivore and keto is that it's usually easier for people to comply because they feel satisfied. Their cravings tend to go away and they tend to stay on it. And I'd say compliance is more important than anything else. And it's certainly more important than believing any calorie is the same as any other calorie, because those calories could very well have different effects on your body, right?
Right. My other contentious point about number 2 is right there at the bottom. It becomes clear that weight loss when following a low-carb diet is actually the result of a reduction in total calorie intake and not the increase in protein. And they did cite some studies. I don't know, Tom, if you had time to look over any of the studies and check their research. Maybe we can do that as a part 2. But I mean, we know that fat is being burned because of ketosis. I mean, I mean, everyone cycles in and out of ketosis. That's what we're naturally meant to do. Now, is it possible that everyone that loses weight is in a state of ketosis? You can be vegan and a state of ketosis, you know,
You can.
and be fat burning.
Yep.
When you calorie restrict or food restrict, you are kind of moving more closer to a state of fat burning. You know, if I'm correct, you can correct me, Tom. So it's just that unless you're on a keto or carnivore diet, you're usually not testing ketones. You know, I don't know plant-based people that test ketones unless they're plant-based keto, you know, which there are people like that. And I'd love to have a conversation with people that do plant-based keto.
Yeah. That'd be curious. I mean, I'm sure you, with a lot of coconut oil and stuff like that, you could do keto. I mean, a lot of people on keto diets that eat meat use a lot of like coconut oil and stuff like that. So MCT oil and so on and so forth. But I would say,
oh, sorry. And we really don't know. I mean, yeah, some of it is going to be water. Some of it is going to be fat. Some of it, unfortunately, what you don't want though, and which is what's wrong with, you know, a high fruit and vegetable diet that makes you lose weight, or what I think is an issue with vegan or vegetarian keto, is losing muscle. That's something that you don't want to do. You don't want to burn your muscle.
yeah, and depending on who you are and what kind of activities you are, you know, keto may not have enough protein for you. But that kind of depends on the individual. And then a lot of people don't really care they feel good, their body fat's going down and they're healing up, and they're not really paying any attention to muscle. You know, they're not trying to break a record at the gym or anything. So I like to take take a little out of the criticism here about insulin, the rise in insulin, because on keto diets, people tend to avoid sugar because they're restricting carbohydrates. So their blood sugar tends to stay lower, and consequently their insulin stays lower. So you can get a little bit of rise in insulin from protein, but most people don't experience uh, anything more than a little bump in blood sugar and insulin. It's a very small increase compared to high carbohydrate diets. And that's essentially the main point. I mean, I don't think it's normal that human beings get all these cavities, right? I think that's the first sign. It's like high carbohydrate diets destroy your teeth, right? So sugar, things like streptococcus is living in your mouth, feeding off of starches and sugars, carbohydrates, and eating away at your teeth. And then it's also present there to make way for things like strep throat, you know? And that's just the beginning, because all these carbohydrates that you can digest that go into you raise your blood sugar, and then your blood sugar gets high and your body's like trying to get it down, and the cells are like, hey, we're full, we've absorbed all the sugar we can absorb, and then your body's like, oh yeah, here's some more insulin, let some more sugar in, and then that's to keep you from dying from high blood sugar. Meanwhile, the high blood sugar is glycating proteins and raising your A1C score, you know, and doing who knows what other kind of damage. And then when that's not enough, they decide you're type 2 diabetic, then they put you on metformin to force more sugar into the cells. And when that's not enough, they put you on exogenous insulin, or you're taking oral or injectable insulin from the pharmacy to get more sugar out of your bloodstream. Well, when this is just caused by eating too much sugar, right? I mean, this is pretty clear. And that in itself is what invokes this release of more insulin. And overstimulating your pancreas to release more insulin just burns out your beta cells. So and then there's all the other diseases that go along with it, like blindness, kidney disease, you know, diabetic ulcers, all that misery that comes along with being a diabetic, right? And then eventually heart disease. The thing that starts all this is like, oh, we're so worried about heart disease as number one killer, and then cancer behind that. And then so what we're going to do is give you a bunch of drugs that are just going to make you sicker and fatter and get heart disease faster. It doesn't make any sense. You know, it's like we were saying in the last video. It's like, you know, these diseases don't necessarily have to be progressive. If you change your diet, they may very well get better. You could just get better by giving up seed oils or something with oxalates or phytates in it, which are plants. So just giving that stuff up can make a huge difference. So I don't really think that people understand that there's this huge difference between blood sugar and insulin levels on one diet and another. Just because protein can increase your, it's like saying, I drove my car at 55 miles an hour today in a 55 mile an hour zone, or I went 212 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone. There's a big difference. Both of them involve driving a car and getting up to speed, but you know, there's a massive factor difference in how fast you were going, and I think that's what this article leaves out, and I think it's probably one of the most dangerous sort of misnomers out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, and they didn't show, you know, any numbers there. They just said insulin is insulin, up is up. Right. Like, it's all the same. Doesn't matter if your blood sugar is 300 or 80.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is scientifically backed. And it's like, well, scientifically it's accurate, but you're really not representing anything useful or meaningful. You're just misleading people. And that's the really sad thing is, you know, we live in this world. I mean, like, I think at the beginning of this article, it says this article should take you about 11 minutes to read. Okay. So here you go. Here's 11 minutes of misleading information. It's factually correct, but it's going to give you the wrong impression. Right. So that's why we're taking the piss out of it today, as Joe would say. So Bulletproof Coffee, this is number 3. Bulletproof Coffee isn't the best way to start your day. With the rise of popularity of the ketogenic diet, an array of keto-suitable foods and drinks has also sprung up. Perhaps most widely spread is Bulletproof Coffee, BPC, which boasts that its ability to prevent hunger, increase satiety, and kickstart your ketosis. BPC replaces your breakfast and consists of 2 cups of coffee, 2 tablespoons of grass-fed unsalted butter, 1 tablespoon of MCT oil. The problem is BPC has a few big downsides. Firstly, it's recommended that the drink BPC in place of your normal breakfast, and whilst it is clearly packed full of fats, it's lacking in all other areas. This means you normally eat 3 meals a day, replace one of them with BPC, and essentially cutting your nutrient intake by a third, which is accounted for having an adverse impact. It's high in calories. Ooh, it's high in calories. One of the biggest draws of BPC in the fact that it supposedly helps you burn more fat, but when you consider that each cup is approximately 500 calories, this looks a lot less likely. To lose fat, to lose weight, ketogenic diets or not, you need to be in a caloric deficit by starting your day with a 500 calorie drink. You take a big chunk of the calories off the table for no real benefit in return.
Can I just stop you right there? So
no, you can't. No stopping.
No stopping.
This is an express train.
Plow right through it. That's
All
right.
That's it.
I just think it's so funny that they talk about nutrients. It not having nutrients. It's like, it's like, so starting the day with a donut, like, is that better? Like, what are we comparing this to?
Well, let me tell you what I see people eat for breakfast typically. Sugary cereal with skim milk on it, right?
Right.
Now,
1%,
Is there anything in 1 or 2% milk that's not instant butter that's nutritious? No.
Oh, no, wait. They're being nutritious because they're having rice milk and almond milk, Tom. We forgot.
What about the oat milk?
The oat milk. That's right. Are we being plantist?
Yes. Clearly, we're being specious too.
So, obviously they don't care about nutrition. I'm just sorry. I'm calling them out. Because there's no comparison. Like, oh, that's worried, whereas, a lot of health are like, how many people just start their day with coffee naturally? How many people don't eat breakfast? They got to be at work by 8. They're not doing breakfast, Maybe they're doing a Jimmy Dean's microwavable at best.
And let's say you're eating a donut or a cereal or toast or whatever. What's going to happen is you're going to eat that. It's going to spike your blood sugar, and then you're going to be hungry again before too long, and you're going to want to eat more. And that's going to get in the way. Eating all that sugar is going to get in the way of burning fat. Whereas if you have 500 calories worth of, tasty beverage, you're going to be satisfied for a while, but you're already going to be burning fat. You probably just continue on burning body fat once the 500 calories is done, right?
And an easy way for this nutrients would be to add a raw egg. There's nutrients.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that fat is one of the primary macronutrients, and it's like, you just ate your primary nutrient, which is animal fat.
And MCT is going to be in a coming up video. Don't worry, guys. We'll hit that.
Yeah, we're going to cover coffee and MCT oil coming up. Would you like to take any other swings at this at number 3?
I'll let you take the saturated fats.
The saturated fats. Yeah. So, I mean, for a long time there, they've been vilifying saturated fat. MCT oil, of course, comes from coconut oil, which coconuts are full of saturated fat. Well, a lot of times things like coconut oil and palm oil and stuff like that are higher in saturated fat than even like animal fat, like beef or pork fat. So I think beef and pork fat, they're only like 40% saturated fat or something like that. So I don't know exactly what it is in butter, but you're better off eating that than polyunsaturated fats for sure, or hydrogenated vegetable oils, or your PUFAs, your high omega-6. Most of that stuff, it's already oxidized. It's not good for you. If you eat a donut, it's in there. You eat breakfast cereal, it's in there. And believe it or not, when you have skim milk and they take the fat out, you're just increasing the sugar concentration because you remove the better nutrient, which is fat, which is what they're adding to this coffee. And I like coffee, but I'm not going to say coffee's a health food. I just eat it because I drink it because I enjoy it. I'm not really a Bulletproof Coffee guy, but I get it. A cup of coffee with some cream in it. It tastes pretty fantastic. So you ready to move on to number 4?
So, I mean, why are we told to avoid saturated fats?
Well, I mean, just essentially because they thought it was cause heart disease, right? But we know that's not the case. It's, saturated fat doesn't cause heart disease, doesn't cause coronary artery blockage. So that's old stuff. This has been debunked now. They've been trying to prove this case since the 50s, and it's just failed. So anyways, yes.
So in butter, so in 1 tablespoon or 14 grams, there's 102 calories, more or less. 16% of it is water, 0.12 grams of protein, 0.01 grams of carbs, sugars, 0.01 grams, fat, 11.52 grams, and saturated fat, 7.29 grams, monosaturated fat, 2.99 grams, polyunsaturated fat, 0.43 grams, and trans fat, 0.43 grams. So there's butter.
Yeah, I don't. So 2 tablespoons of butter and a tablespoon of MCT oil. I don't see that adding up to 500 calories. Do you?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. That's the kind of Bulletproof Coffee they're talking about here. Of course, I don't think there is one official recipe for Bulletproof Coffee, right? I mean, there's all kinds of them out there. I'm not even sure which one exactly Dave Osprey recommends, but yeah, I don't think it's 500 calories worth of fat, and fat's good for you. So if you like butter in your coffee, go for it. Camel butter, yak butter, cow butter, chicken butter, big butter, whatever you want. Cat butter. All right, number 4. You ready for number 4?
Yep.
It can offer fat loss benefits, but not in the way you think. Well, what the hell what do they think we think? What do you think they think we think, Justin?
I don't know. They didn't ask me what I think.
So a ketogenic diet is merely one way of creating and maintaining a caloric deficit over time. That's true. The main way it does this is by severely restricting carbohydrates, which in and of itself creates an instant reduction in total calorie consumed. I don't know why they made that statement because it kind of doesn't make any sense. You're saying we're just cutting out carbohydrates, therefore we're going to eat less? I mean, to the extent I think that's true, but they haven't really explained that, have they?
Nope.
Does this mean it's good for a fat loss? Well, it can be, and there are several studies showing that ketogenic diets can result in weight loss and in turn improve health. So they didn't completely bash keto.
No.
However, it's worth pointing out that that research on the whole shows that there is no statistical difference between weight loss on a ketogenic diet and weight loss following a standard diet that includes all macronutrients, which means you're adding in carbs and not just fat and protein. All right. So I don't know why they don't go out of their way in these articles to explain. We're only talking about 3 macronutrients, and sugar is the one you can live without. So why do you think people do better on a keto or carnivore diet and when they get rid of carbohydrates? What's the crux of it, Justin?
Well, I mean, carbohydrates are disruptive. I mean, shooting up your insulin, the sugars, I mean, messing with the Randall cycle. If you have carbs and fat, you get triglycerides and pumped into your fat cells. So yeah, it throws off your system carbohydrates, and so and we almost nobody is like, you look at carbohydrate intake and you would classify it as overconsumption. I mean,
Yeah, when you eat
carbohydrates for
carbohydrates,
breakfast. Sometimes that's all carbohydrates and sugar for breakfast. Even if you get a burger from McDonald's, the Big Mac has three, three
three
pieces
pieces
of
of
bread
bread.
on it. Yeah,
Yeah, and then
exactly.
that sauce has sugar in it. Ketchup
Right.
has sugar in it. Right. Well, I think the
And then you're
thing,
having spaghetti for dinner.
I think we should go back to compliance. And I think when you take carbohydrates out and you get past that, your cravings go away, because cravings tend to drive people to eat more carbohydrates, whatever form it is, whether it's pasta or it's ice cream or
But I'm trying to steel
Coca-Cola.
man them, because they say here in this study that they were able to get people on standard American diet to lose weight somewhat comparable to a keto diet. And it's like, okay, if you're trying to lose weight and if you don't struggle with some kind of food addiction, which is something we'll cover later towards the end, but it's like, well, then what's your reason? Why go keto? And it's like, well,
Because compliance is typically higher. That's the thing. So it's long term. It's a long term success. So let's say,
it's overall healthier. I feel like is a stronger point.
right. So, and I think we're going to get to that. I'm going to get to that in the next one. But I think um, compliance, long term compliance, we don't know what length of. So, would they study people for a week, 2 weeks, a month? What about 2 years, 5 years? How many people do we know that have been carnivore for 10, 11 years now? People that were keto before that, they were keto for a couple of years and then they went on carnivore and they're doing any better. And they most people have an easier time complying long term, and they don't address that here. So yeah, if you calorically restrict on either diet, you could have similar results in the short term, but it's the long term that really matters, because we all know the damage that yo-yo dieting could do to people.
True that. True that.
So number 5, your workouts will suffer, at least in the short term. Justin, did your workout suffer at all when you went carnivore or keto?
I was exercise intolerant before going carnivore, so I had nowhere to go but up. I
Right.
really couldn't work out because of debilitating migraines and not having enough energy and having to eat 5 to 6 times a day, and pop all kinds of supplements. Yeah, no, mine from the beginning was an improvement in working out since I started with not being able to. So yeah,
Right.
this is all you though, because this is your territory. So I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
No, I mean, my story is very similar. It's like I got so much better on keto because the pain went away, my lung capacity increased. I never felt a lack of energy. Some people get a keto flu kind of thing or whatever. Any change of diet can, upset your digestion. It could, cause your immune system to dip because all of a sudden you're eating a different diet or whatever. You could get a cold or flu or whatever, or you could just not feel good because you can't metabolize all that fat or whatever. But for me, I felt so much better. I never noticed any downside, and my workouts immediately got better. My capacity to lift got better. My capacity to do cardio got better. And basically, the pain went away. So I think we've talked to many people that had similar stories. They never had keto flu. They never had carnivore flu. They just felt better. And they're like, holy, the light goes on. They're like, this is great. I want to keep doing this. Right.
Totally, that's been me.
All
And
right.
here they talk about glycogen stores, but I mean, wish Joe was here because he could rip that specific part about. I mean, going on what 40-mile bike rides without
Right.
anything sometimes. I mean,
Right. Well, see, a lot of people think like, oh, if I'm not eating sugar, my body's not, replenishing my glycogen stores. So if you're not like an extreme, marathoner like Zach Bitter or something, and you're not a, strongman requiring 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 calories a day, people don't seem to have an issue. maybe in the beginning if they're not fat adapted or something like that. But your body generates all the glycogen you need. It generates all the glucose you need. And in fact, letting your body regulate glucose levels in particular is probably the best way to go. Let that liver do what it evolved to do and stop cramming carbohydrates down your throat and spiking your insulin. Because when your body does it the way it's designed to do it, it works a lot better. So perhaps some people get a little bit of a lull in the beginning, but most people do not.
And then once they're fat adapted, I mean, how many people have we heard where they just kill it in the gym better than ever?
Yeah, a lot of people do better than ever, for sure. So you ready for 6?
Yep.
Number 6 says it's not superior for muscle growth. Now, I think that's just going to depend on where you are. If you're already a person with a lot of muscle, you may very well need more protein. If you're not a person without much muscle, it may have adequate protein, right? But feeling better and fueling movement, which fat does, is going to facilitate the ability to put on muscle. I don't know anybody who actually lost muscle going on a ketogenic diet. The people that might be at risk are people that are already very muscular and weren't getting enough protein. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, they cite some really weird studies here, and then they complain about the methodology and stuff, which is fine, but muscle's hard to measure. I mean, I'm not sure, I mean, what a good scale. I mean, I have a fancy scale that's connected to an app that supposedly tells me, you know, my fat percentage, my muscle percentage, my
Right.
bone, etc. But I don't know how accurate any of that is, honestly,
Yeah,
you
they're
know?
not.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, over time, they might help you measure change fairly well, but Bart explained the experiments they did, and it really has to do with your conduct. It's just measuring conductivity. So measuring how well electricity is flowing through your body, and then making an educated guess, which isn't really that great. And I'll tell you, muscle is complicated. A lot of people already know, like, there's a difference between bodybuilding and strength training. So I just lift to lift. I lift to see how much I can lift. I don't lift to go up on stage and flex in front of a bunch of people. And it's a very different strategy. And you can actually generate more muscle volume typically of bodybuilding or body sculpting than people who are strength training, because strength really is a different game. You could train in similar ways and eat in similar ways, but at the end of the day, to perfect them, the final techniques are different. So measuring muscle is hard to say. I say if you want to put muscle on, eat more protein. Once you're fat adapted, you're not going to find that gluconeogenesis is really spiking your blood sugar that much. Your body pretty much just goes to generating blood glucose on demand as it needs it. And that might be higher in the beginning when your body's used to more sugar. But the longer you're low carb, it seems like the more people's blood sugar stabilize, and eating a little extra protein has little or no effect. You get the same little bump in blood sugar and insulin. So
I just want to make a little quick comment, which will probably be a whole video in itself another time. But, you know, in this community, in this space, keto, carnivore, low carb, whatever, there's a lot of people that freak out over their insulin being a little over 100, even fasted. And I think there was some new research that that was some kind of sign of longevity or better health outcomes if you were
really,
more like 103 or something like that. So recently I had some blood work done, I believe in April, and I'd fasted for like 18 hours before having it done because I was experimenting with some fasting at the time. And when I had it done and the results came back, my blood sugar was 99. And I was like, how could that be? You know what I mean? And so again, I like to use the word blood sugar stability or insulin,
yeah,
over, you just don't want, I think anything up and down roughly 20 points. Now, I haven't looked up the science of this, is more or less negligible. I think when you get 25, 30, obviously 60, 100 points, that's when we need to worry. That's kind of my thought. Little quick tidbit on it.
Well, and glucose and insulin, or glucose in particular, it tends to go up and down as much based on activity as anything too. So let's say you're burning off a bunch of glucose and glycogen. Your body's going to start kicking some of that out into the bloodstream in order to replenish what you've used. And there's a big difference between having a blood glucose of 99 and a blood glucose of 500.
Right.
Which is a lot of people out there walking around 3, 4, 500. Somebody I didn't know well, but that worked with somebody in the family, was in the hospital. They measured his blood glucose. It was 1,700.
Wow.
And they couldn't believe he was conscious.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my God. It was the highest they'd ever seen at that hospital, and they couldn't believe he was still alive. And this is a guy who had I don't know much about his diet or anything like that. I'm not claiming to know that, but he had a hard time regulating his blood sugar, and he went on wasn't paying any attention, and he obviously was very sick. But yeah, that's what we're talking about, and people want to scrutinize like, oh, your blood sugar is 110, you're pre-diabetic, and it's like, well, what time of day? Did you just run a marathon? Did you work out like an animal yesterday? What's going on? What's your insulin level look like? What's your how much damage are you doing? What's your A1C score? What's that all look like? Are you feeling really healthy? How's your heart disease? Do you have a CAC score? So yeah, I mean, your body's your blood sugar levels are going to fluctuate based on activity.
Your activity, stress. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things. Which all these tests are always faulty. All these blood draws and stuff, because it's a snapshot in a continuous process. And unless you're measuring, we recently did our show with Rebecca. Great show. You should check it out.
Yeah.
Fantastic
Rebecca
story.
Farmer.
Yeah, Rebecca Farmer.
Right.
What was she talking about when she was in the hospital? Them checking her blood sugar like 10 times a day.
25 times a day. Like, what?
And if you really want to be accurate, like, honestly, that's what you would have to do.
Right.
Like, if you really want to be scientific about blood sugar, that's what you have to do, at least every hour or so, every hour and a half.
That's why these CGMs, these constant glucose monitors, are so popular now.
Yeah.
It's funny to start seeing people wearing those. I see the thing on their arm now when I'm at the store. And I saw a lady yesterday wearing one of the CGM probes or whatever yesterday. And that poor lady was having a hard time walking. She had a hard time getting out of the car. She's older, middle-aged, I'd say, but, kind of heavy set. But you could tell, man, she was just struggling to move, and I think that's the thing. I mean, if you're normal, maybe 100, or 99 is normal, especially when you wake up in the morning, for your blood glucose, and you're healthy at that. That's entirely different than it being 250, So, and I would imagine over time, it's going to change, and it's going to change primarily based on our adaptation over time and our activity level, right? I'm sure after a heavy workout, doing a lot of lifting, my glucose levels probably went up. So, even with no carb intake. But the thing is, if you're forcing carbohydrates down your throat, you're eating them all the time, you're going to raise your blood sugar. If you don't, your body will do it for you the way nature designed it, the way we evolved. So yeah, you might need some extra protein on a keto diet, but that's going to depend on the person. So anything else to add there, Justin?
Nope, I think that covers that point.
I'd say I think that's all the points in this study. And I would say one of the reasons why a lot of people come to carnivore from keto is because it's so much simpler eating carnivore than it is keto. I think a lot of people avoid eating meat because they're worried about gluconeogenesis on keto. Their blood sugar is going to spike, and and all that, and it's going to throw them out of ketosis. But then we starting to realize that like a mild form of ketosis has the same benefits for most people as having high ketone levels, you know. And I like to make the point that the ketogenic diet that they invented in the 1920s was meant to be a fasting mimicking diet, because they noticed if people were having seizures and you didn't feed them, their seizures stopped. So like, well, how do we do it? How do we create the same sort of physiological effect as not eating, but still give people some food? And it became a ketogenic diet. But I think that's kind of misleading, because I think really what they were discovering is how we were supposed to eat to begin with. It's not that fasting is so important. It's that eating a high fat animal based diet is the natural state of man. And I think we evolved over the last at least 3.7 million years, you know, that being humans and the hominids that came before it, evolved eating animals. We just fought around animals. We started out eating the leftovers that other animals killed, perhaps, and then we started killing them ourselves. And we've been clearly butchering animals for 3.7 million years, because there's actual archaeological evidence. And of course, we left all these cave paintings. We left all those piles of bones. We left mammoth traps all over the planet, you know. So I don't think there's any mistake about it. And I think that's what they discovered when they invented the ketogenic diet or the fasting mimicking diet, is that human beings were meant to be fueled with animal fat, and their bodies are meant to be built with animal protein. And I think that's the gist of it. And there's lots of people out there that do very well on a ketogenic diet and still eat plants, right?
Yeah, totally. I just want to comment, that this information, again, being quasi dangerous, because, people with food addiction, emotional eaters, diabetics, it's like, oh, just cut your calories. They just make it sound so simple. And I get it. We make sounding eating meat or keto simple. Well, there's nothing simple about keto. Sorry, I had to do that little dig there.
Yeah, it's complicated.
But carnivore, and the reason why, we promote it, and there's so many people that the people that are looking for keto and carnivore, especially that struggled with eating disorders, struggled with being overweight, this is their last chance for a lot of them. Like, if they don't get it now, if they don't change now, it's heart disease, diabetes for life, losing a leg. And for anyone to put out information of why they shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know who's this written for. The average person that they're doing all right with their health. Maybe, but if you're struggling, why not give it a shot? I don't know. It's worth it, I think. And there's a lot of people that, like you said, compliance, being able to stay keto and being able to stay carnivore for years and live a full life.
Yeah, I don't know what the author's name is. Theo, and his last name is Brenner-Roach. And this is supposed to be an 11-minute read that came out on July 8th, 2020 on the website medium.com. I don't know exactly who this is for. It's probably like a lot of things. It's just to get people to read the articles, get clicks. Yeah, they got to put booties in the seat or get clicks. That's how people get paid.
Right.
And I really don't know what the hell this picture has to do with it. And this is one of the things that baffles me with thumbnails. I don't know what a chick holding up lemons to her face has to do with ketogenic diet.
Yeah,
I don't remember lemon being central to the ketogenic diet. So anyway,
I don't know, but I don't know either. It was really confusing. The other photos made sense. There were just some generic guys lifting. Yes.
Yeah, and I could see maybe if it those guys actually didn't look that big. They were cut, but they didn't look that big. So
and they probably eat keto. Just kidding. We don't know. It'd be really funny.
We don't care. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for watching. make sure you subscribe. Make sure you stay subscribed to all your favorite channels, because there seems to be some weird glitch in the system and a lot of people are getting unsubscribed. So leave us your comments. Send you, again, if you have any complaints, send them to Raymond Nazon. And hopefully we'll have the gang back together next week. Until then, please eat some meat, feel better, and whatever you do,
don't fall down the carb hole.